East Prussia, January 1944. The corridors smelled of carbolic acid and cold metal. Every sound was sharp, heels striking tile, scalpels clinking against trays, the whisper of a curtain closing. Outside, the world was frozen white. Inside, everything was grey. Nurse Anna Reiter adjusted her mask and tightened the strap of her apron. The morning roster was already pinned to the wall. 40 German wounded, 17 amputations scheduled, and written in smaller letters at the bottom. Category B, enemy casualties. That last line always came with silence. No one wanted to look at it. She signed her name beside the shift record. Rank, Senior Nurse. Assignment, Ward 6, Temporary Infirmary for Foreign Laborers and Prisoners. The ink bled slightly into the paper, as if even it hesitated to belong there. Outside the ward, the air changed, thicker, humid, full of disinfectant and something else beneath it, something human, a faint smell of blood, iodine, and fear. She pushed open the door. The beds were lined in perfect symmetry. On each, a body wrapped in gray blankets. Their faces were hollowed by exhaustion, their hair cut unevenly. Russian, Polish, sometimes French. They were the defeated. At least that's what she had been told. A doctor stood near the window, adjusting his gloves. His insignia glinted. SS Medical Service, the Black Eagle above the caduceus. He turned when she entered. "Nurse Reiter, new orders from Berlin," he said. His voice was thin, precise. "We are to limit morphine to Wehrmacht personnel only. Prisoners will be given the alternative compound, diluted." She nodded, though her stomach clenched. He continued. "Do not waste antibiotics on them. The Reich cannot afford compassion." Then he left. The words stayed. Anna walked the ward, checking pulses, changing dressings. She worked quietly, methodically. Her hands moved from habit. Disinfect, wrap, tie, record. She had learned to think in rhythm, to survive in silence. But rhythm failed her when she reached the last bed. A boy, maybe 18, stared back at her through half-open eyes. His uniform, what was left of it, carried no insignia. His dog tag was blank metal. When she pressed a hand to his neck, his pulse fluttered like a trapped bird. She wrote on his chart, "Fever, possible infection." She added nothing about pain. They didn't record pain anymore. The night nurse came in, balancing a tray. "You're wasting time with them," she muttered. "They'll be gone by morning anyway." Anna didn't answer. She focused on the bandage, the color beneath it. Infection spreading. She could smell it. Sweet, faintly metallic. She remembered the oath she had written in her notebook back when she trained in Königsberg, before the war turned medicine into obedience. "I will care for the sick, whatever their creed or nation." She had copied it from Florence Nightingale once. It wasn't part of the Reich curriculum anymore. She whispered it again, under her breath. That night, after lights out, she slipped into the storage room. She knew which drawer held the antibiotics, the good ones, reserved for officers. She took one ampule, maybe two, and hid them inside her sleeve. Her heart pounded so loud she feared it would echo. Back in the ward, she knelt beside the boy. His breath rattled shallowly. "This isn't charity," she told herself. "It's medicine." The needle slid in. The vial emptied. She marked nothing on the chart. When she stood up, she realized her hands were shaking. She stared at them. Pale skin under latex, steady enough to save, capable enough to kill. In that moment, she felt the smallest fracture inside herself, the soundless crack that comes before a collapse. At the morning briefing, the SS doctor reviewed the reports. "Excellent efficiency," he said. "We lost 8 prisoners overnight." "Good." It means we're not wasting supplies." Anna kept her face blank, her breath even, but her mind was still in the ward, where one boy, the one who should have been dead, had opened his eyes at dawn and whispered a single word in German. Danke. She was trained to heal, but now the regime asked her to choose who deserved it. If you think compassion is weakness, wait until you see what she does when orders say otherwise. East Prussia, February 1944. Snow fell again, muffling the sound of the world outside the hospital. Inside, everything was too loud. The clatter of trays, the sharp voices of surgeons, the echo of boots on tile floors. Nurse Anna Reiter walked quickly through the ward, her steps measured, her face blank. It was the only safe expression left. Every morning began with inspection. Beds straight, charts updated, no deviation. The new chief physician, Dr. Klaus Brenner, an SS officer transferred from Warsaw, liked control. He spoke of medicine the way generals spoke of campaigns, as something to conquer. During his first address to the staff, he said, "Our duty is to preserve the strength of the Reich, not its enemies. Compassion is wasteful." He smiled when he said it. That was the part Anna couldn't forget. Her tasks seemed ordinary. Temperature logs, pulse readings, bandage changes. But the order behind them had changed. The wounded were no longer just patients. They were categories. German soldiers, essential. Prisoners, expendable. Foreign laborers, optional care. It was all written that way in the supply ledger, neat and simple, typed by someone who'd never seen a wound. The younger nurses followed the rules easily. They were new, raised in the Reich schooling, the ones who'd memorized slogans before they learned anatomy. Anna had been trained before all that, back when medicine was still a language of mercy. She remembered a line from her old instructor, "A healer's only loyalty is to the living." She repeated that in her head every day like a prayer she wasn't supposed to say. In late February, Brenner ordered a trial of resource efficiency. The policy was clear. No narcotics for enemy casualties. Minimal rations. Evaluate if their recovery benefits German operations. The report was meant to sound scientific. It was just cruelty with better grammar. Anna filled the charts as instructed, until she couldn't. One afternoon, she found an old man, a captured Red Army medic, lying half-conscious with a fever. His chart said, non-priority, prognosis, terminal. He whispered something when she leaned over him, a few words in broken German. She understood only one. "Daughter." His hand trembled as he tried to reach his pocket. Inside was a photograph, edges cracked and stained. A girl with dark hair, maybe 16. Anna froze. The picture looked like her younger sister before the war. She folded it carefully and placed it on the table beside him. That night she gave him water, cleaned his wounds, and slipped a half-dose of morphine from her own supply bag into his IV. He slept without groaning for the first time in days. The next morning, the SS doctor reviewed the ward and frowned at the patient's chart. "Curious," he said. "Still alive?" Anna kept her tone neutral. "Perhaps the fever broke." Brenner smiled faintly. "Nature is inefficient. We'll correct that soon." She watched him walk away and felt the familiar cold spreading behind her ribs, the chill of helpless rage. The inspections grew tighter. Pharmacists had to count every vial. 2 nurses were dismissed after irregularities in the morphine ledger. Rumors said they were sent to the front lines. Anna learned to copy handwriting, to forge initials, to move like water between the cracks. Her small rebellions multiplied. An extra bandage here, a ration of sugar there, a dose of antibiotics split between 2 men. Each act invisible, each one a whisper against an avalanche. But the guilt was different now. Not fear of punishment, but fear of doing nothing. One evening, as she left the ward, she passed a propaganda poster near the exit. A smiling nurse holding a bandage. The caption beneath, "Care makes the soldier stronger. Care makes the Reich eternal." She stopped and stared at it until her hands clenched. Then she tore it down, folded it into her apron, and threw it into the furnace behind the kitchens. The paper caught, curled, and vanished. The flames reflected in her eyes like something waking up. She had begun to treat obedience like a disease, one that needed curing. If you think courage only comes with guns and medals, wait until you see what happens when she starts saving lives. The Reich wanted gone. East Prussia, March 1944. By then, the hospital had learned how to hide its own conscience. Orders came stamped, signatures flowed downward, and every wrong thing was dressed in paperwork. The only sound that felt human anymore was breathing, thin, labored, fragile. Nurse Anna Ryder kept her eyes on the floor when the stretchers came in. A new transport from the front. 2 Germans, 7 prisoners. The German soldiers went straight to Ward 1. Clean sheets, full rations, morphine. The prisoners were sent to Ward 6, her ward, where the windows frosted from the inside, and blankets were a privilege, not a supply. As they unloaded the stretchers, a name tag slipped from one man's wrist and landed near her shoe. She bent to pick it up. The tag was scratched metal, engraved in Polish and German, Later Jakob Nowak. His pulse was faint, his uniform soaked through with mud and blood. The surgeon muttered, "Stomach wound. Don't bother too long. They never last." Anna looked at him. The man had eyes open, but not pleading. Just waiting. She nodded once. "I'll take him." His bed was near the far corner, away from the light. When she cleaned the wound, he didn't flinch, though his jaw tightened. He spoke first, voice hoarse, but steady. "You're not SS." She froze, glancing at the door. "Be quiet." He smiled weakly. "If you were, you'd have hit me for saying that." She said nothing. He added softly, "You're different. You look at us." She wanted to deny it, to keep the wall between nurse and patient intact, but the wall was already cracking. She changed the dressing, checked the IV. When she turned to leave, he whispered in German, clumsy but clear. "Do you have music here? The kind with violins?" The question caught her off guard. "No," she said. "Only marching songs." He laughed, a dry rasp. "Then it's true. You've forgotten how to listen." Days passed. Against orders, she kept him alive. She mixed stronger doses, shared bits of bread when no one looked. Each evening, she stayed a moment longer by his bed, telling herself it was for observation. But it wasn't. He spoke more now in fragments. About Warsaw before the war. The cafes, the smell of roasted chestnuts in winter. About his sister, who played piano and swore she'd never learn German because it sounded like thunder. About how he'd been captured near Minsk, shot through the abdomen but refusing to die until he saw home again. Anna listened because no one else would. In his voice, she heard something she'd almost forgotten. Warmth. One night during blackout, she brought a small candle stub from the chapel and set it on the windowsill. He watched the flame flicker. "It looks like a violin note," he said. She smiled faintly. "How can a flame be a note?" "It moves even when the world tells it to stay still." She turned away so he wouldn't see her eyes. For the first time in years, she felt the weight of every order she'd ever followed. When Dr. Brenner entered the ward later that week, he stopped at Nowak's bed. "Still alive. Impossible." He flipped the chart. "This one was terminal. You must have recorded it wrong." Anna met his eyes. It was a clerical mistake. "He's responding to treatment." Brenner raised an eyebrow. "Responding? To what? She didn't answer. He stared a moment longer, then shrugged. Fine, but don't waste penicillin. He'll relapse soon enough. When he left, her hands were trembling. She didn't know if it was fear or defiance anymore. Maybe both. That night, Jakob whispered, "Why are you helping me?" She hesitated. "Because you're my patient." He smiled faintly. "No, that's not it." She looked at him, then said quietly, "Because I'm still a nurse." When she left the ward, she wrote in her private notebook, a habit she hadn't broken since her training days. Name, Jakob Nowak. Diagnosis, humanity. Contagious. She stared at the page, then added one more line. "I think I'm infected." The file said, "Enemy." The man said, "Thank you." And for the first time, she wasn't sure which version of the truth she believed. If you've ever wondered what it costs to feel compassion in a world built on hate, wait until you see what happens when she turns defiance into action. East Prussia, April 1944. By spring, the snow had melted into gray slush, and the air inside the hospital carried the sour smell of infection and bleach. The wounded came faster now, in endless streams. Germans, Russians, Poles, all bleeding the same color, all stacked in the same silence. Nurse Anna Reiter moved like a shadow between them, quiet and invisible. That was how she survived. But invisibility had its cost. The more she hid, the more she saw. Every day she watched the lists posted on the ward doors. Transfer orders. Some were sent east, others to special facilities. Everyone knew what those words meant. No one said them out loud. Among the names one morning, she saw his, Jakob Nowak, marked for transfer. Her stomach dropped. She read the order twice, then a third time. It carried Dr. Brenner's signature. Unfit for further recovery. A euphemism that always ended in a ditch. Anna stood frozen, hearing only the ticking of the clock on the wall. Then she moved. That night after curfew, she unlocked the medicine cabinet. Her hands shook, not from fear, but from purpose. She filled 2 syringes, penicillin and morphine, tucked them into her apron, and slipped into Ward 6. Jakob was awake. The candle stub on the windowsill had burned down to a pool of wax. "They're moving me," he said softly. "I know," she whispered, "but not where they think." He frowned. "You'll be caught." "Maybe," she said, "but I can't let them finish what they started." She injected him quietly, watching his breathing steady. Then she pulled a small vial from her pocket, ink diluted with water, and altered the chart. Diagnosis, suspected typhus. Isolation required. She stamped the form with her own seal and added it to the quarantine file. Bureaucracy had created the monster. Now she would make it eat itself. The next morning, when the SS truck arrived for the transfer, the guard glanced at the list. "Nowak?" Anna pointed toward the quarantine ward. "Typhus case. Command forbids contact until cleared." The guard recoiled instantly. "Typhus? Then burn the bedding." He scratched the name off the list himself. "We'll report him as deceased." When the truck left, Anna stood in the empty yard, breathing frost and disbelief. For once, a lie had saved a life. Days later, 2 other prisoners fell ill. Real fever this time, not forged. No supplies remained for them. Anna divided her doses again, marking both as German volunteers on the log to secure medicine. The pharmacist questioned her handwriting once. She smiled. The doctor approved. He didn't ask which doctor. By May, whispers began. Someone was altering records. Someone was stealing rations. Dr. Brenner's patience thinned. Inspections grew frequent. Soldiers prowled the halls at night. Anna learned to hide everything. Syringes in hollow drawers, food under bandages, antibiotics in the folds of sheets. Her world had become a map of secrets. One evening, Jakob tried to sit up. His face was pale but alive. "You shouldn't stay here," he told her. "They'll find out." She smiled faintly. "You sound like my conscience." He looked at her and said quietly, "No, I sound like someone who owes you his life." She turned away. "Then keep it. That's enough." But the walls were closing in. A junior nurse named Greta, ambitious and nervous, had begun to watch her too closely. She asked questions. Why certain vials went missing. Why certain patients lingered. Anna gave polite answers and locked her drawer tighter. The next morning, Greta reported her. 2 officers arrived before sunrise. They searched her locker, her notes, her records. They found nothing. But suspicion doesn't need proof. Dr. Brenner called her into his office that evening. He gestured toward the seat opposite his desk. "Do you know what they're saying about you, Nurse Reiter?" She met his gaze, steady. "That I do my job." His smile was slow and deliberate. "That you do more than that." He leaned closer. "You've been here long enough to understand obedience. The Reich does not reward sentiment. If I find you've been helping them..." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Anna nodded once. Understood. But her voice no longer belonged to fear. That night she returned to Ward 6 one last time. Jakob was sitting up, pale but breathing. "Tomorrow," she whispered. "You leave. There's a supply convoy heading west. I've arranged it." He shook his head. "They'll kill you." "Maybe," she said. "But someone has to drive the truck." She reached into her apron and pulled out a folded piece of paper. A travel pass, signed with Dr. Brenner's forged signature. She placed it in his hand. "You'll need this more than I will." He wanted to speak, but she stopped him. "Just live," she said. "That's all the thanks I want." Outside, the sirens wailed for an air raid. While the world above them burned, Anna Reiter smuggled a half-conscious enemy out of the Reich. By dawn, the convoy was gone, and her bed was empty. When the officers came for inspection, they found the chart exactly as she left it. Patient, deceased from typhus, body incinerated per protocol. And they believed it. For a while. She had crossed from obedience into open defiance, and there was no turning back. If you think saving a life ends the story, wait until you see what happens when the Reich discovers hers. East Prussia, May 1944. The corridors were too quiet. No shouting, no orders, no footsteps. Just the kind of silence that usually comes before a storm. Nurse Anna Reiter felt it before she saw it. The shift in the air, the looks that didn't last too long, the way conversations stopped when she entered a room. By noon, she knew. The storm had found her. 2 officers appeared during the midday inspection. Black coats, red armbands, Gestapo. They asked for her calmly, as if they were there to deliver flowers. "Frau Reiter," one said, "we need a word." Her pulse jumped, but her voice stayed steady. "Of course." The walk to the office was short, but it felt like kilometers. Every pair of eyes in the hallway followed her, then looked away. Dr. Brenner was waiting, expression unreadable. The taller officer opened a folder. Her handwriting stared back at her from inside. Charts, prescriptions, a signature that wasn't hers, a stamp she'd forged. "We found inconsistencies," he said almost gently. "Medical irregularities." Brenner spoke then, his tone surgical. "She's been falsifying reports. We lost track of several enemy patients under her supervision. One listed dead was later seen alive near Lublin. A clerical miracle, perhaps?" The smaller officer leaned closer. "Tell us, nurse, how does one resurrect the dead?" She said nothing. Her hands, hidden behind her apron, were trembling, not from fear, but from rage. The questioning lasted hours. Same questions, same tone, same impossible demand. Names, motives, confession. They didn't hit her, didn't shout. That wasn't their way. They just let silence do the work. Why would a loyal German risk everything for the enemy? Anna looked at the floor. Because a wound doesn't carry a flag. The officer's pen paused over the page. He repeated it softly, like a riddle. A wound doesn't carry a flag. Then he wrote it down. The next morning, she was confined to a small room off the ward. One bed, one chair, one locked door. Through the thin wall, she could still hear the hospital continuing without her. Trays, orders, footsteps. Life pretending nothing had changed. Hours blurred. Once, she heard Greta's voice outside the door, giving her report to Brenna. "Sir, I warned her. She never listened." A pause. Then Brenner's voice, colder. "No one disobeys and walks away clean. The Reich will not allow it." Anna closed her eyes. She saw Jakob. The last time she'd seen him, pale but alive, the truck's engine coughing to life in the dark. She hoped he was far by now, past the lines, somewhere with music again. She smiled at the thought. Even locked away, that smile felt like freedom. The trial came quickly. No witnesses, no defense. A one-page statement. Anna Reiter, convicted of treason and collaboration with the enemy. Sentence: death by firing squad. They allowed her to write a letter. She wrote slowly, carefully, as if each word had weight enough to outlive her. To whoever finds this, I was never brave. I was just unwilling to stop being a nurse. They said I helped the enemy. Perhaps. But in those faces I saw my brother, my father, my country, all bleeding the same. Tell them I died clean-handed. She folded the page and handed it to the guard. "Make sure it reaches the chapel," she said. He nodded. His eyes were red. He'd probably seen her in the wards once. Maybe she'd bandaged him too. The execution was set for dawn. The last thing she heard that night was the whistle of a train somewhere beyond the trees. She thought of the children it might be carrying, of the wounded still lying under gray blankets, of the hands that would keep moving long after hers stopped. When the guard came for her, she stood without help. No prayer, no tears, just a whisper to herself. Healing never belonged to them anyway. The report filed that morning read, "Sentence carried out. Subject showed no remorse." But remorse was never part of her crime. Her crime was mercy. They called it treason. She called it nursing. If you've made it this far, stay for the final chapter. When the lives she saved return to honor the woman the Reich tried to erase. West Germany, 1967. The hospital was new. Bright walls, glass corridors, the hum of machines that hadn't existed when the war ended. But history doesn't stay buried. It lingers quietly, like disinfectant in the air. A group of visitors arrived one afternoon, old men in plain coats, carrying flowers instead of medals. They walked slowly down the corridor until they reached a small brass plaque mounted beside the entrance to the surgical wing. Anna Reiter, 1915-1944, military nurse, executed for treating prisoners of war. She chose healing over hate. For a moment, no one spoke. The oldest of them, his hair thin, his eyes sharp, stepped forward. He placed a single red carnation beneath the plaque. His name was Jakob Nowak. He had crossed 2 borders to get here. After the war, he'd spent years searching for the nurse who'd saved his life. All he found were records, fragments, rumors, the copy of a court document stamped treason. Now, decades later, He finally stood before her name. A reporter approached him quietly. "Were you one of her patients?" Jakob nodded. "I was one of the condemned." The reporter hesitated. "And she saved you?" Jakob smiled faintly. "No, she just refused to let me die." He reached into his coat pocket and took out something small, a folded piece of paper, yellowed with age. He opened it carefully, his hands trembling. It was a fragment of her handwriting, the note she'd slipped into his bandages the night of his escape. He read it aloud in German, voice cracking. "Live. That's all the thanks I want." The room fell silent. Even the nurses on shift stopped to listen. They wore white coats now, not gray uniforms. Their world was different, brighter, freer, but they understood what it meant to make choices in silence. Jakob turned to them and said softly, "She healed soldiers and prisoners the same way. The war punished her for that. But I'm standing here, and that's her victory." Outside, the afternoon sun touched the plaque, and for a brief moment, the letters gleamed like they were alive. Someone had left a stethoscope hanging beneath it, the tubing shaped into a quiet circle, a symbol that never ends. A young nurse passing by asked, "Who was she?" An older doctor replied, "A German who remembered she was human." Years later, when students studied wartime medicine, her case became a footnote. Executed for disobedience. But those who read deeper found the letters, the testimonies, the names of 12 men who survived because one nurse decided the oath to heal meant everyone. History called her a traitor. Humanity called her a nurse. The narrator's voice, calm and distant, might as well have been reading from time itself. She served a regime built on death and practiced life anyway. They took her name from the records, but not from the living she left behind. If you listen closely some nights, in the quiet wards of that hospital, when the wind moves through the vents, the nurses say you can still hear the faint click of heels down the hall, the steady rhythm of someone who never stopped walking toward mercy. She defied hatred with healing hands. She lost her life and gave others theirs. Would you risk everything to save someone you were told to hate? Tell me below. What would you have done?